Hey everyone, as the title suggests, this video is going to be all about failing your A levels, and more so, this is my story of me failing and where I'm at now, and the in between of how I got from failing my A levels to where I'm at now in life. So, to take you back, I failed my A levels 9 years ago now. I remember the day I opened up my results and I got a C in business, E in media, and a U in geography. Shortly after this, or actually probably in that same morning, I got an email from UCAS saying, "Hey George, you haven't got into any of your universities that you've put down." And it can be a very, very lonely place at that point because everyone else around you is celebrating. You failed. Other people who have failed don't share that they've failed. I know personally I felt a bit embarrassed about my results, so I didn't want to share it with people at all. And it can be quite a tough place because you feel so lonely in that moment, and also you're scared because everyone else around you has an opportunity. Most likely they've got into university, but you actually don't know what your next move is, which in that scenario is very, very tough, I think, for a young person to deal with. When I look back on the reasons why I failed, personally I was not mentally well at that time. So I had actually quite low mood. I didn't attend sixth form when I was 16, 17, 18, about 50% attendance. I would say it was very close to undiagnosed depression to some extent. I'm a bit wary of using that word, but I just didn't want to speak to anyone. I didn't want to be anywhere, and I didn't care about anything. I was so sad that none of this really mattered to me. So, but that's a completely different topic, a different video in itself. Anyhow, by the time you do open your A level results, there is some sort of hope or miracle inside you that's thinking maybe it has worked out for me, even though I knew when I did those exams I was not good enough on that day. So I failed, and what's brilliant about failure is it's almost like an ultimatum that hits you in the face. It's a yes or no. It's like someone's now told you no, you can't move on to the next stage like everyone else. So, in that essence, very, very self reflective moment for me where I'm thinking, George, you haven't got into any university. Let's actually take a moment to reflect how we got to this stage. So, at that point, I thought, you know what, I need to sort myself out. I'm not mentally well. I need to work on that. I need to become healthy before I can actually progress at all in, say, education. So it gave me a tough decision because at that point in time, you failed, and the people around you, friends, family, they probably think, George, you need to, what's the best, quickest way to go to, say, university at that point, or where can you go, where will take you to keep you on the same track as, say, everyone else. But what's difficult, especially when you're at that age, is you really need to start making decisions for yourself. And for me, that was a journey of ownership. What I mean by that is I knew I wasn't well, and I admitted that to myself, and I knew I needed to get well before I moved on. So I decided to actually take a year out. I worked behind a bar for a year full time. Probably, when I look back, the best decision I've ever made in my life. I got my confidence back. I became super social, and I was mentally healthy again. I could take on challenges. I wasn't scared to be critiqued, and because I'd already failed, my fear of failure was completely gone. And for anyone who has failed and when they look back, like me, they will probably say it's probably the best thing that's happened to them. So I would say failing my levels was the best thing that happened to me. Anyhow, I've worked a year in the pub. I'm back. I feel me again. And I think to myself, I want to jump back into education. I want to go to university. So I was actually researching how can I get back as soon as possible because I'd had these 2 years of A levels but failed. I haven't got the grades. They don't mean anything. You have to look at what's next. You can't think of what could have been. So what was next for me? I was actually looking at YouTube videos of other people who had failed, funnily enough, and this is me, I guess, repaying the favor. So one YouTube video was someone who had failed, and they actually did a access to higher education course. So then I thought, okay, let's research into that. So it was a 1 year course, all coursework, and it was the equivalent of doing 2 years worth of A levels, which worked for me because I was still working part-time behind this bar to get some money. And in the meantime, my full time in the day, I was studying, doing this coursework, and I was so engaged, so motivated. And when you have someone engaged and motivated and they really apply themselves, well, my grades, I generally got distinctions in every bit of coursework I did. That opened doors for me in terms of universities. I was getting into Russell groups, also some other well-regarded universities like Lancaster. Did have an offer from Sheffield University, the Russell Group. In the end, I decided to go to Bournemouth University for a few different reasons. One, because of where my mental health was at. I was healthy, but then I was also still a little bit reserved about pushing myself to the limit at maybe these Russell groups. Well, that was my perception of it at the time. And I didn't want to put myself in a really high pressured situation, especially when you're moving away from home, all these different changes. I knew I was a little bit vulnerable, so I didn't want to put myself in that scenario. Looking back, I probably could have gone, I would have been fine. So anyhow, Bournemouth, I like the place. I also really like the beach, which was nice. And I just decided to study finance and business. And similar scenario happened at Bournemouth University as it did when I went to college. I was healthy, I was motivated, I applied myself, and in doing so, I actually came out with a first-class degree in finance and business. And that is really I guess that's my story in a nutshell, is I failed my A-level exams and I ended up getting a first-class degree. So to anyone who has failed, do not give up. You can by far and away achieve great things. That's definitely how I feel about it. I just needed to work on myself and take ownership of my decisions. And that really catapulted me to getting that first class degree. And after you get a first class degree, it does open a lot of avenues to different good jobs. So for me now, I'm in a really big global company. I'm studying to be a management accountant, and I'm actually one exam away from being qualified. So if you had told George 9 years ago, who's just opened his A-level results, really low mood, failed, and there were no opportunities for him at that time, to where he is now, he would not believe you at all. And I really want anyone watching this video who's failed to just not give up on themselves, because I said this in my yearly goals ever since I failed, and I still write it in my yearly goals now, is that George needs to keep believing in George. And you need to keep believing in you, because at the end of the day, you're going to be the one who picks yourself back up after this failure. And you will look back on that failure after you've achieved things in your life, and you think, you know what, that was one of the best experiences that ever happened to me, because you had to pick yourself up and catapult yourself to the next level. You had to look at yourself in the face and say, why has this happened? And take ownership of your decision from then on. So that's my story. Really open to hear anyone out who may have failed, who may want some advice about the future and what that could look like, just because I've been in your shoes, and there's not too many people you may feel you can turn to right now, but I can sympathize with how you're feeling. And all I can say is the future is very bright. It just feels like right now you're probably feeling like you're at rock bottom. Anyhow, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one.